Hi everyone, today I'm going to do a 101 on concealing dark circles under the eye. So I'm going to do a kind of overview of products and techniques that I use in my job. Now, I don't have a model today, so I will admit that I'm not the best model for this, but I have an idea about that. I'll show you because I don't have any makeup on, but I'm just going to go with Bioderma just to clean that area before we start. But I am lucky in that I don't really have dark circles under my eyes. It's very often genetic, and my mother doesn't have dark circles under her eyes either. I've got other things that, believe me, that annoy me or that I focus on when I'm trying to do my makeup, but I'm quite lucky and blessed that I don't have really dark circles. However, you're stuck with me as a model today, so I'm going to show basic techniques, ideas, tips, and then I had an idea because I did try to make this video a couple of years ago because it's requested so often, and because I've got so much to say about this subject and I've worked on so many different faces, so many skin types, you know, in my career as a makeup artist, I just had so many things I wanted to say. And the last time I tried to make this video, it was around an hour and a half long, so we scrapped it because it was way too long. And this time I think what would be really nice to do is to invite you, my subscribers, and this is only open to subscribers, to volunteer yourselves. If you live in London, that's the only caveat in this because my studio is in London, to volunteer yourselves if you have, your real bugbear is dark circles under your eyes, dark shadows. Volunteer yourselves as a model, and I'm looking for maybe 2 to 3, 4 models who have different types of dark circles, so the pigmentation or more of the bruise type, the purpley circles, dry skin, oily skin, mature, young, whatever. So I've set up a special email which is darkcircles@lisaeldridge.com, and if you live in London, please email me, and if you'd like me to have a go at concealing your under eye circles and you're happy to appear on the channel, then I would love to see you. So what I thought I'd do today is focusing on myself, which I agree I'm not the best model for this, but just focusing on tips today, and then I will be able to expand further with you, my lovely audience, as models. So back to business. So where do we start with concealing under eyes? Now I'm going to tell you that I have concealer on here at the moment. I have pencil on my lower lip, in case you're wondering, is she wearing makeup? Is she not? And I've just put mascara through my upper lashes. My brows is a whole other story. I'm going to save that for another video. I don't have any makeup in my brows, but that is another video. So the first thing you need to think about when you're concealing under eye circles is the skin around the eyes. Everyone's skin is different around the eyes. Some people's skin is very sensitive, other people's it's very dry and flaky. Other people will be very oily around that area. You know, you can actually see visible oil sometimes underneath the eye as the day goes on. So really, depending on your skin, it'll be very important how you prep that area. So I'm going to show you some different types of things that I would use on clients, or I would use myself. So if I had somebody with a very dehydrated under eye area, maybe somebody that just got off a plane, I would use something very light and hydrating. This is quite a nice one. This is by Embryolisse, and this is a hydrating eye stick, which is also very cooling. This almost feels like water going on underneath your eyes. And I would do that right at the beginning before I did any foundation. So I tend to put a light layer of foundation all over the face anyway before I do concealer. The reason I do that, and the reason I think it's a good idea to do that, is because when you then put on your concealer and you're starting to blend those edges, you're blending it into something there already. You're blending it into the foundation. It just helps all of those layers to become so seamless and beautiful and the way I like them to be. So this is very light, and actually it doesn't leave any oily residue. I'm going to put a second layer on. Now something like this, or this could be an eye cream that you just keep in the fridge, so just a hydrating oil-free eye cream. This would be perfect for somebody with like a combination skin, normal skin, someone that's not extremely dry or extremely oily. If you do find that your concealer creases a lot and you tend to use a heavier, thicker eye cream maybe, just because it feels nice on your dry skin or your very dehydrated eyes, then what you should always do, if you can feel the actual product sitting on the surface of the skin before you apply concealer, you do need to blot it, because there's a good chance it will have natural oils in your eye cream, and most concealers that are long lasting and long wearing have volatile silicones in them, which is what dries them out. And sometimes something which is very naturally oily can break down that process and make it harder for it to sort of set. So you could use either a tissue just to blot, and if you do this a while before you start your concealer anyway, you'll find it sinks in. You could use a blotting paper, or you could use something like a sponge, you know, a dry sponge, just to pick up any sort of heavy residue. Another thing you could do is use a serum. So this would be better if you were more on the oily side. I'm using this one, which is the Lancôme one, because it also has a little bit of light reflection in. And again, this is something that you can keep in the fridge. Now, these are not necessarily treatments that I'm talking about. I have got 2 separate videos on how to treat under eye dark circles and how to treat puffy eyes. I'm going to link to them. Now, another thing you can use under your eyes if you are super oily is you can use something light and hydrating. Make sure that's blotted. Make sure that's really in synergy with the skin, so it feels like it's hydrated, but it's not sitting on top. And then you could use a small amount of a primer. So this is something that you'd usually use on your lids to stop the oiliness coming through. I only recommend these types of products underneath the eyes on people with very oily eyelids or for special occasions, because some of them can be quite drying. This one by the balm I find to be the least drying. But again, we're going back to these volatile silicones, so they do kind of suck the moisture out. And but you could put a little bit of that under your eyes if you were very oily, and it would definitely stop that oily breakthrough that you would normally get. So once your eyes are prepped and you feel like they feel moisturized, they feel good, but I'm not feeling this layer of oiliness on my skin, then we can go towards the concealer. So there are different types of concealers. And again, it depends how dark you are, how bad those circles are, how much coverage, how opaque you want to go, and also what your skin type is again, because some of them are just too drying. Although they work really well and cover circles, they start to look really dry around your eyes. So it's matching up your skin type, your needs, and what you want the end result to be with the right formulation. So before we get into formulations and actual levels of coverage, I'm going to talk about colour, because often people say, oh, should it be a lot lighter? Does it need to be this? Does it need to be that? It needs to correct and brighten your under eye areas. So it's about, most under eye areas are either suffering from pigmentation if they're dark, which is more of a brown colour. It's to do with the melasma in the skin. It can be a yellowy colour, slightly greeny even, whereas the more bruise type of dark circle, which is basically a bruise, is purple, blue, reddish blue, those sorts of colours. So what you need to think about is first applying a colour which is going to correct that colour. And when I get models, I can show this, I guess, better. But I'm going to start by showing you, say for me, I am purpley, I'm darker actually in a corner there by the sides of my nose than I am really underneath the eye. So for me, I would go more in there. So the sorts of things you'd start with is, I'll show you the kind of correctors on the market. So here's a really intense red and orange. This would be good for a darker skin tone. For under the eyes, there's a light peach here, because I'm going to go for a peachy tone in this Rimmel palette, or indeed with this one from MAC. This is good because I've got 2 correctors and 4 concealers, so you're able to concoct your own mix. I'm going to use the peachy tone here. This is better for covering red or neutralizing red. This is definitely more of the blue. I'd say it's more of a blue color. So I'm going to use this peachy toned colour just there. And then I'm just going to pat that in. You can pat it in with anything. You can pat it in with a sponge, with fingers, whatever feels right to you. So I'm adding a bit more of the peachy tone, and it's really good to build up slowly. This will help with stopping creasing, because if you put on tons and tons and tons, it's maybe more than you need, where you're not stepping back and looking and saying, well, that's enough now. So I've added more in here of the corrector and in the inner corner. So that peachiness is starting to really cancel out. Now, if you're not brilliant at doing makeup, this is a really good way to do it. So adding something to correct the underlying colour first, and then just putting concealer on top. If you are really good with colour, with mixing, with makeup in general, for example, if I'm doing a red carpet, I will create my own concealer for that person. So I will mix in the corrector, so the colour I want to correct with, but I'll mix that with the concealer. So I do it in one layer, if you like, and I'll add a personalised level of light reflection. So I will do that, but it takes a while. It's something you can definitely learn to do yourself. In the end, you'll probably be mixing them and creating them and making them, you know, different for different seasons or depending on your skin type. But in the beginning, if you just want to nail it, go for a corrector that is the opposite colour to the base colour of your dark circle, and then just pat. Before I get started on formulations and coverage, I'm just going to talk a little bit about delivery systems, and that means the kind of packaging, the way the product is presented. Because it used to be that years ago, when you had a compact sort of solid concealer versus a thin liquid that was in like a lip gloss packaging, that thin one would be lighter coverage, maybe even light reflective, whereas the compact one would be much more opaque and heavy coverage. That's all changed because of cosmetic science has just moved on so much. So nowadays I'd say the delivery system doesn't really matter. You can get a very high coverage, very, very thin liquidy concealer that comes in a lip gloss applicator. Likewise, you can get a solid compact that gives really radiant, very moisturizing light coverage. So choose maybe a format that you like, but don't get hung up on that. It's more about what's inside the formula. So I'm going to talk about formula now. So I'm going to start with the lighter weight, light reflective ones. Now these are lightweight reflective concealers. Very different to highlighters. So something like Touche Éclat, which people would say is a concealer, to me that's a highlighter. So if I was going to use that, I would mix it with concealer. But you can get lots of concealers that do have a lot of light reflection in them. That's kind of their selling point in a way. And they're really good for days when you maybe don't want to wear a lot of concealer under your eyes. They do have pigment in them, so they do give you some coverage. They're not full coverage, but they're nice because they have the light reflection in. So it can be nice if you don't have really bad dark circles, or if you just want to even out underneath your eyes on a day off when you're not wanting to do a full makeup. So you'll remember this was an old favourite of mine, which is the Airbrush Concealer by Clinique. I always liked this because it was like a hybrid of something like a Touche Éclat with a concealer. So it's got the pigment in, it's got the coverage, but it also has that lovely amount of light reflection. And also the colours can be quite peachy or quite yellow, so they're quite good also at correcting as well. Likewise, the one from Rimmel is good, which is got lots and lots of light reflection in. It's not too heavy, it feels very light underneath the eyes, and that one doesn't crease. I mean, they're so light, all of these. The other one I'd mention as well is the Charlotte Tilbury one, which I don't have here, but it comes up with a cushion, and it's really nicely light reflective. It's more of a, like all of these, they'll say they're more light to medium coverage, although you can build them up. And then when you apply them, I'm going to apply this one now. You're just going to go on top. And then just let it set a little minute, and then start to pat. with fingers. So that's a very easy way of just lifting a shadow. And again, do it in a couple of layers. So you can just see here when I'm moving the actual light reflection. Light reflection is just that they put pearl in. So they'll put sometimes multicolored pearl depending on the skin tone, and it's adapted, and it just is something which will detract away from the shadow. The other thing you can do, of course, is you can mix light reflective type pens in with heavier concealers as well, which is how I always do red carpet. I mix a little bit of everything and make my own concoction. So now we're going to talk about concealers that have much heavier coverage but still feel lightweight. For these, I've chosen the NARS Radiant Creamy Concealer, Double Wear Concealer, which is an old favourite of mine, Idole Ultra by Lancôme, and Maybelline Fit Me. I think these, for me personally, are good because they are not necessarily for super oily skin or for super dry skin and mature skin, but they tick a lot of boxes. So I'm going to show you other ones that I prefer for oily skin and I prefer for dry skin in a minute, but these would be my kind of, they sit nicely in the middle in that they're very flexible, they're pliable, they stretch, they feel moisturizing, but they're not too moisturizing, but then they don't dry down too drying either. So these are like my sitting in the middle high coverage concealers. And these are ones which, again, they all come in a really good color range as well, which is so important. And the way I would apply these, I'm going to end up doing them all on myself, again, is a very similar way. So I would have foundation on already, and then depending on the client, I would do lots of dots to start with along the underneath the eye area. I would either use fingers or a sponge depending on the formulation. Some of them are just, they set so quickly and they have such a, you can feel the silicones kind of evaporating in them. These ones aren't as much, but the ones in the oily skin section, they're the ones that really evaporate quickly. And then just pat into place. Again, build up slowly. You don't need to do that massive triangle where it's really, really thick. You're better off doing thinner, a couple of thin layers, I think. So normally if I was using something like this, which I consider to be a medium to full coverage under eye concealer, I would have my foundation on already. The reason, as I said at the beginning, is because once we get to the end here where we're buffing out the concealer, we can start to really get those edges seamless into the foundation. You can take your brush that you applied your foundation with and really connect the dots, really bring that concealer into the foundation and into the skin. For super dry skin, I've chosen some really moisturizing concealers for under the eyes. I've chosen firstly the bareMinerals Serum Concealer, and this is nice because it's a medium coverage and you can build it, but it's definitely more about the moisturization with the coverage. You can apply it exactly the same way. I'm definitely not in the market for this type of a concealer because I'm more oily around here. I'd say I'm more combination, so I tend to stick to the previous category. But if you are very dry, then all of these are good and they're all medium buildable coverages. Next one is the By Terry. Again, it's a serum one, so it has a lot of skincare, a lot of moisturization, a lot of hydration. This is particularly nice for more mature skin. So if you find that underneath your eyes is quite crepey, so you have lots of fine lines with the dryness, because it really doesn't show. It helps to conceal without emphasizing dryness and without emphasizing lines and dehydration in the skin. So all of these are good for that. This one's particularly good for mature skin. Then I've chosen the eraser, which is by Maybelline. This is just one which feels very light, feels moisturizing, and it's got quite a good applicator. Two other ones which are good is the RMS one, because it has coconut oil in, so it is definitely for the dry skin girls, and it's a natural, or boys, and it's the natural, it has a lot of natural ingredients in, and that's one which again, I'm going to talk about creasing later, but these crease more. And then there's the Glossier Stretch, which is a really nice moisturising one with avocado oil. So they have natural oils in. They're less heavy on those volatile silicones. They just don't emphasise the dryness, but you're able to build up with the coverage. So finally, for very oily skin, I've chosen the Soft Matte by NARS. This is nice because it does feel very lightweight, but it definitely has a matte finish and it holds those oils at bay. The famous Shape Tape by Tarte, just because when it sets, it does set down and it's not particularly good, I don't think, with very dry skins, or if you have if you're mature under the eyes. But if you're very oily and you really want to cover those under eye dark circles, I think it is a good one. Oily to combination, I'd say. ColorStay by Revlon, which is part of the ColorStay family, so it's a very long wearing, perfect for more of an oily skin. And this one, which I haven't actually tried, but I believe, or I've heard, it's a good dupe for the Tarte one. And this is Makeup Revolution. It's actually only £4. I've tried it once. I'm just going to try it on this eye, actually, now. I don't know if it's my colour. Oh, it's too light. Yeah, that is too light. It's a good way of demonstrating, though, what's too light and how ashy. If you choose a colour which is too light, how ashy it can get. Even if I'd used a corrector underneath that, it probably would have started to look really greyish. But it feels nice. It does feel quite a lot like Shape Tape. I can feel it setting. So I'm just going to remove this one. It's a nice formulation, but that colour just left slightly ashy look under the eyes. So we're going to talk a bit more about colour, which before I do that, I'm just going to add a touch of the peachy shade under here, particularly in the inner corner. So for the colour of the concealer, it needs to look imperceivable to the eye. So when someone sees you, you don't want to see white patches under the eyes, or really, really bright, kind of, 3 shades lighter than your foundation, because it can again look good on television or all of that, but in real life it will show. So you want something which you're trying to brighten up your under eyes. You're trying to, which the corrector really helps with, because that is correcting the colour. So even on me, I could just do the corrector, which is the peachy toned concealer. And I'd say even that in itself is enough. And obviously what I'm showing you here is just what's working for me, which is why I've done a call out for models, because every case is unique and different. And it's actually impossible to make one video about how to do concealer, because it's too dogmatic an approach. There is artistry involved, there is different techniques and ways of working with different skin tones, different skin types and different effects. So I'm just showing you today a kind of rough overview, but also it is just what's good for me. So there's the peachy corrector, which has lifted the blueness. So now I'm just putting on foundation, because I will need to show you how I'm going to blend the concealer that I'm going to do under this eye into my foundation. So foundation on now, and I'm going to go over the top of the corrector with some concealer. I actually always use a sponge with this particular formulation, it just works better. And then just start to pat, really pushing into the skin. So this is the light to medium. So for me, I find that when this is on, I certainly look brighter under the eyes. It takes away the shadow, but it doesn't look too ashy and too white. Likewise, it's a little bit lighter than my foundation, so it doesn't, when it dries down, end up making me look tired and dark. And in terms of where you'd put it, concentrate mainly where you're dark, and then feather out into the rest of the area, because something like this, which is quite pigmented, you can't just put like a ton of it in the corner, because then you really notice the difference between where it's very opaque and where you haven't got any. So apply where you're dark and then feather out. So I'm feathering down here, just so those edges are really seamless. And because I've got foundation on, I can take it into those edges. I can take it into the foundation and even just buff. It's just about creating an optical illusion of this lovely bright area, but without being able to see, oh, that's the concealer, that's where the concealer ends, because you can see a distinct edge to the colour and the actual texture, but everything is just seamlessly flowing one into the other. So just to recap, under this eye I've got corrector, then I had the light reflective pen, the Clinique one, and then I had the NARS creamy on top. Under this eye I've got corrector and I've got the Tarte on. Now very often when I'm doing makeup for somebody that I've never met before, because everyone's physiology of their face is different. Some people, whenever they're talking, there's a lot of movement under the eyes, you know, or people do a particular face that they do, and you can notice quite quickly that that happens to be the way their face moves. So sometimes I'll do the eyeshadow and then I'll do the kind of foundation and concealer, and then I won't set the concealer or finish it until maybe I've done mascara or finished the brows. I do that just so I can learn about how foundation sinks into the skin, concealer sinks into the person's skin, whether they, you know, there is some skin kind of eats product, other people don't, and whether or not it creases. So I think you can see straight away that this is obviously a lot more creamy, and we have got that light reflection in, which hopefully you'll pick up. I can see it quite clearly in this mirror, whereas this one is definitely, it's already set and it's a lot more matte and a lot flatter. One thing I do is I'll often check that we haven't overloaded a product. So you might have put something on and actually realised that it hasn't sunk in the way you expected it to, or if you're just generally somebody that is a little bit heavy-handed with your concealer, at this point you might want to, like, I have 2 creases under this eye, so I might just want to blend those creases with a small Q-tip. This eye hasn't creased, but I didn't expect it to, because this is my oily under eye concealer. And then if you have, again, really overloaded the skin, you might want to take a clean sponge and just have one more go over. So this is waiting a couple of minutes and then thinking, actually, I went a bit heavy there, so I'm just going to give one more pat over, or I'm going to use a tissue, or I'm going to go over with a blotter, whatever. Or you might just think, well, after a minute, I think it needs a bit more of a blend around the edge. I think that concealer is something that I never commit to immediately, with clients anyway. And then I'll often, before I actually set the concealer, giving it that bit of time will tell me how much setting it needs. So whether I am going to need to really lock it in place with lots of powder, or whether I'm going to be able to maybe get away with it and just pat it a little bit more, or whether I just need a tiny bit of powder. So I'm going to show you different powders. And in general, a little bit of powder under the eyes is a good thing with most concealers, particularly the ones which don't have high amounts of silicones in. So the ones that I showed you for dry skin that are very moisturizing, because they tend to just have a nice life of their own and they move a lot. So a little bit of powder can be helpful. So I'm going to show you different types of powder for using under the eyes. There is a classic just translucent powder. That's a Chanel one that has a little bit of colour in it. Again, you can go for something which is a bit yellowy, you know, or a bit peachy, which again will help with your colour correction. Or you can go for something completely neutral, which would be a silica powder. Silica powders are those fluffy white ones that, when they're applied incorrectly, are the ones that you always see in those bad red carpet pictures when people have those crazy white marks under their eyes. That's silica powder. There's nothing wrong with silica powder, it just needs to be applied really well if you're going to be in flash photography. And silica powders come in the kind of blot powders, like the Fenty blot, Makeup Forever do a blot one. You can also get them as loose powders, either plain or with other ingredients. So this one, for example, is the By Terry one, and this one already has in it some hyaluronic acid, so again it's more moisturizing, so that would be really good for a dry skin. And one more to mention actually is you can get loose powders that have optical diffusers, so it's a little bit like the concealer that I mentioned earlier that has pearl in, so it's light reflective. My favorite one is the Lancôme Absolue powder, but they only sell it in the US. They don't sell it here in the UK, but I always get it when I go to America, and that just has enough light reflection in that it's good for, again, mature or very dry skin. I don't really like sparkly powders under the eyes in general, but I think if you've got very dry skin or on a mature client, if it's just the right level, it can set the concealer nicely and just pump a little bit more light and a little bit more blurring, which is nice. I'm going to use just a classic silica powder, so I'm just going to use a blot powder, and I'm just going to pat along there. So this is my light reflective, lightweight concealer. So I'm just going to set that. Under this eye, I personally, on my skin, wouldn't apply any powder to set this because it's a self-setting concealer. I felt it setting, and if I was to powder on top of the Shape Tape, I would look dry and it would emphasize fine lines and just not look good. However, if you are very oily and very young, you can use a puff to apply your powder and just press into the area there. What I don't think you need to do is baking. I just don't think you need to put tons and tons and tons and tons of powder on unless you're going on stage or you're on telly or you're just generally maybe going for a night out in a nightclub or something. But otherwise, I just think it just gets too drying. I mean, I just wouldn't do that unless you are, again, super, super oily. And on top of Shape Tape, you need a lot of powder. But really just, play it by ear. And then if you do use powder and it's thicker than everywhere else, always dust over. I haven't got a big powder brush here, but just take those edges off, because otherwise you will find that, particularly in photography, you see the edge of the really powdered area. And I just think build slowly. So hopefully that was a good overview. I have so much to say about dark circles. I think I could probably make a feature film, but I don't know how successful that would be at the box office. So I'm going to wait until you guys, my subscribers, apply to be a model. If your pet peeve is dark under eyeshadows, please email darkcircles@lisaeldridge.com. And if you're in London, I would love to have a couple, 2 to 3 models come in, and that way I'm able to go more in depth on techniques for particular issues and really show and demonstrate a little bit more. And I think that will help me to get everything I need to say about concealers, all of my advice and all of my knowledge, which has been gained over 25 years of covering dark shadows day in, day out on all different people. I'm able to kind of get that information out there. So do apply, and if not, stay tuned for the rest of the series. Take care. Bye.